Eastern princes are gods in the capitalistic system. So they went above and beyond. They just fired him, his supervisor, the person who, like, the entire chain of command. On top of that, they gave him a key to the city and apologized to him. And Obama even personally called and apologized. So often you'll notice that if it's like a foreign citizen from a country that they need oil from, especially, like, they'll be very, very, it's magical how the verdict somehow always ends up that way. So that was the other case. And then the third case was, what's his name? Jason Van Dyke from Chicago. But what he did was a drive-by shootout. Like, the kid was just walking on the street. He was 16, Laquan McDonald, and he just went boom, 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 boom. And actually smoke came out of his chest. So that's a third case. So, like, I can only remember a handful of cases. So it feels like he was a sacrificial lamb. So what does this have to do with Tsarist Russia? Well, when you read this case, beat but not to death. Okay, so one thing I do ask is that you use the one that I have called from vilenin.substack.com, because the original translation's a little weird, and along mostly with my Russian teacher on Friday, I retranslated. Well, he retranslated it while I observed. My Russian's not good enough to be retranslated, and then I learned some words. So his retranslation is way more clearer and much better. And the problem with Russian is that they don't have prepositions no, is it prepositions? I don't know what it is. Articles. Yeah. So it's always based on the noun case. So for example, there's a really, we'll show this next week, but there's like, if you want to say, okay. Okay, so if you want to say, this is Lenin's book, you'll say Kniga Lenina, means like possession. And and that really ends up confusing people. Yeah. And if you want to say let's see, Leninist book, you say Leninskaya Kniga. I hope I got that right. I hope no Russian is listening. I think it's Leninskaya. Oh, okay. Leningrad's book would be Leningradskaya Kniga, I think. Anyways, so with those kind of, like, because they don't really have the same kind of prepositions as in English, the translations can be very confusing, because in Russian you can have like sentences that are like this long, and in English you need to break it up into like 5 or 6 sentences, and that's kind of what we did. So please use our translation, which is slightly different and a little less confusing. And we have Nick, who's Socialist MMA. So and afterwards I'll be back to answer 2 Twitter questions, and that are really good questions that I just couldn't answer on Twitter. And also whatever questions you have. And I also slid into the DMs of Prager U and asked them to debate me. So see if you can encourage them. So with that, we begin. Today we have Nick, who's Socialist MMA. Hello?
Hey, how you doing?
Okay, did I get it right? Socialist MMA, or is it Socialist _ MMA?
Yeah, that's fine. You can call me Nick too.
No, I called you Nick, but I'm wondering, what is your Twitter handle? Is it Socialist _ MMA or?
Yeah, just Socialist MMA. It's fine.
Oh, okay. So we have Nick today, and can you tell us about how? So I take it you're into mixed martial arts. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got into it?
Yeah, I wouldn't say lifetime martial artist, but I've been training for maybe about 15, 20 years.
Wow.
My dad is a former Golden Glove regional boxing champion. I think he won Golden Glove about 3 times. So he was very accomplished regional boxer, trained with Larry Holmes, Leon Spinks, some of the best heavyweights in the 80s. he trained with. So I always had combat knowledge and always found it fun. A lot of people, when they grow up, they play with Legos. They do whatever, like play tag. Me, my brothers, my cousins, our idea for fun was fighting. Like we would that's what we did. And now looking back at it, now that I'm older, I'm like, I don't know how we got away with it. Because we would like we would go at it. And it was fun too, because we kind of um I watched a lot of action stuff growing up, like so things like Dragon Ball Z, Power Rangers when I was younger. Like I grew up watching these combat entertainment. So that's how I kind of got into it. My dad trained me. When I turned 18, I got into other martial arts because I only threw hands before that. My friend who was a wrestler at the college, she told me about a martial art club, an MMA club, which I was excited about because I was a fan of the sport for a long time and wanted to learn the other arts. And ever since then, so that's what 11 years ago. So I've been doing
Wow.
jiu-jitsu and Muay Thai for 11 years, and I coached at the University for Kansas City, UMKC, because they you know how colleges have a lot of different extracurricular activities and clubs. There was a martial art club at the time over there, so I joined them, and I eventually moved up and became a coach for them for a few years. It's been a few years since I did any coaching, but that's what I love. That's why I always joke around that I want to train some of these comrades because I love coaching and developing fighters. That's a passion of mine. Unfortunately, I never had a chance to go pro, but I'm very confident in my skills.
Oh, okay, so let's say that it like me or somebody who's never had any martial arts or anything like that. Where do you suggest we start?
I have anyone have their own personal biases. I think finding a martial art that you enjoy is most important.
Uh-huh.
But there's never a bad time to start martial arts. So I've seen like grannies in jiu-jitsu class who I'm like, if they run into like an average person, like she's not gonna be easy to take down. So, but more than just becoming a fighter, it's good for self-improvement, for mental health. I like martial art training in general changed my life a lot. Help me increase my confidence and all that. So I always tell people I think everyone should train a martial art. You don't have to be the next Roy Jones. You don't have to be the next heavyweight champion or anything like that. But it's just always good knowledge to have. And it's, once again, just help your self improvement.
So where do I start? Like if I want to take let's say I am interested in taking class, like what do I, it's so overwhelming. Most people don't know where to start. So what do I do next?
I suggest Brazilian Jiu Jitsu and
Uh-huh.
Muay Thai. Those are especially Jiu Jitsu because Jiu Jitsu is really easy for most people to kind of do. If you do not have access to gyms or anything like this, um, there are a ton of great YouTube tutorials now. Like the internet makes learning new skills way easier. And now you actually with a lot of martial arts instructors, they will say, "Oh, you can't, don't watch YouTube videos. You gotta actually come and do the real thing." Let me tell you, they hustling you. They only tell you that because they want you to be reliant on their training, so you keep paying them. But if you look at some of the greatest fighters in the modern sport of MMA right now, the most famous one being Conor McGregor, they said they learned martial arts by like for him for example, he learned training with his friends in the garage because they'll watch videos and then they will practice it. So if you're a beginner, once again, you're not going to turn into like an amazing world champion martial artist without proper training. But just by doing and drilling the basics with a friend, that will put you above the average person and give you the confidence to know that you at least know what to do when you're in combat situations. So to answer your question directly, that what I suggest if you have a Muay Thai, boxing, or jiu-jitsu gym in your area and you can afford it, definitely check that out. Because there are a lot of different plans you can customize based on how much you want to train. If you don't, just watch some tutorial videos. Like kickboxing is the best thing to do for that because there's a lot of videos that teach you how to throw combos. They teach you defense, proper technique, and once again, nothing is as good as in-person training. But if you are focusing on your technique and you're doing the video right, you will improve. It will help you get in shape too, because that's another good thing about martial arts. Help you keep in shape. It's a fun way to stay in shape.
Okay, and you recently started a new program called the Fred Hampton Left. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes, because we leftist spaces have been kind of hijacked by a lot of honestly privileged white people who don't really care about certain issues.
Yes.
And when I say this, most people, if you're a white ally and you know you're on our side, I shouldn't have to like, oh, Seth, I'm not talking about you. You guys know who I'm talking about.
Hold on. Let me just mention this. If you identify as white, in my opinion, you have not gotten rid of your petty bourgeoisiness, because whiteness was created by it's like was created for this continent in order to have middle managers for slavery. So you'd no longer identify as it's a social construct. So you should reject whiteness if you're an ally, in my opinion. But
That's a very interesting point. I never considered that before. That's interesting. That's a very
read Gerald Horne's Counter Revolution of 1776. I'll send you the interview.
I'll check it out.
Oh, hold on. This is really funny though. He sent me his newest book. Okay. Okay. So one of his newest book is White Supremacy Confronted.
Yeah, I like it. I gotta check that out.
I'll send it. I can send it to you after I'm done. But it's like so thick because there's so much white supremacy to confront.
I would love to read that because that point you brought up is interesting. I never considered that before.
Yeah. So this one you actually I'm going to send this to you right away after I'm done. This is you're going to love this because this is about boxing and racism and how it was involved in Zaire. But yeah, I don't. Yeah, so I agree. You absolutely should, because a lot of people don't understand that. Yeah, it's a very, because like as Gerald Horne defines it, whiteness is a pan-European identity, as in like all Europeans are alike. But then they I'm sorry, they bleeping fought World War II and World War I against each other. So Europe doesn't have that pan-European identity. It was created here in America to like uphold slavery, basically.
Very interesting. You taught me something new, that's for sure. So what I was saying is, when I say this, if you're an ally, you know I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about those white leftists who they seem to care only about like saving money on healthcare.
Yes.
Like these are the people who are less likely to talk about U.S. imperialism. They are less likely to talk about the police state and consequences of supporting an imperialist party and what that does to people of color. So there's a giant disconnect there, and I see it even in their coverage. Like there's a lot of popular YouTube shows I even enjoy. Like I don't even dislike these people, but you can tell through the lens of what they cover that they are disconnected from the struggles of the people they say they represent. So when I created Fred Hampton Leftist, this actually the beta project for this was Black Rose Brigade when I first started streaming, because I wanted to use my platform because I feel blessed that people can see what I actually had to say now. So I want to use that to pass that to other Black leftists and other people of color who don't have a voice. Because I call myself a citizen journalist, but that essentially means I don't have the elitism that corporate journalists have. What I mean by that is that corporate journalists, they like, oh, we gotta talk to professionals. We gotta talk to CIA intelligence analysts. We gotta talk to Democratic operatives because they are the so-called expert. Fuck that. Sorry, forget that. I think we should pass the microphone to the people so people can actually understand what the average American and person of color is going through. So that was my mindset when I first created the idea, because there's not a lot of Black leftist media space. So over time, when I had Black Rose Brigade, I met a lot of great people. So when I chose Fred Hampton Leftist, every single person that's a part of that group is people I trust and people who I heard their stories. I know they can explain the Black point of view in a very accurate way. They're not tied up into Black liberalism, which I've been going to war with for like the last 2 years. So that's all I said, to give the voice of young Black leftists who are shut out. Because if you listen to Black Americans who actually have a political voice, who are the people that are being platformed by MSNBC? Joanne Reed, Don Lemon. You get Black imperialists. They are the people who are platformed because W.B. Du Bois wrote about this, because they get these Negroes in high spaces, and then they drag us back to the right. You have otherwise anti-establishment minded Black people get dragged to the Democratic Party because they see our Black leaders and Black celebrities praise them. So we need a counter voice. We need the people who are not giving a platform to be elevated. That's what I try to do. That's the mindset behind Fred Hampton left.
Okay, you know what's really funny? A lot of people read MLK's letter from Birmingham, where he talks about the moderate white left, but then they don't read the next paragraph, which talks about the Black misleadership class, and it's like, so if you read that letter, he talks about both of them, like literally the next paragraph, and I'm like, read the next paragraph.
Our Black intellectuals been warning us about these people for decades. For decades, they've been warning about this. W.B. Du Bois wrote in Socialism in the American Negro. Mm-hmm. He said this. He wrote this decades and decades ago, where he said there's a dynamic. This is a dynamic as old as the slave trade itself, when we were sold by our Black oligarchs as slaves. So a lot of Black people, they see their path to emancipation as gaining political power, and then by joining the forces of oppression, they see that as a way out of the oppressive system. So this is something that he wrote about, and this is something that's been clear from literally ever since we arrived in America, where you had, there's the famous example in, what's the name of that movie? The very popular one with Jamie Foxx, where they had that Black guy who was protecting his white slave owner. Why am I, Django? Yeah, Django.
12 Years a Slave? No. Django.
Yeah, I'm not good with movies. I'll blank on the name, but you guys know what I'm talking about. They had
Django Unchained.
Yeah, they had that Black guy who protected the white slave owner with his life. So once again, these things are not new. These are something that we've been warned about. And my first piece, when I wrote my Substack, when I created my Substack, I knew exactly what I was going to talk about, because this is not an issue that you see discussed by anyone other than young Black leftists, is how Black misleadership, they literally drove us off a cliff. And we need to start having very tough words with boomers. It's a very uncomfortable conversation.
With who? With boomers?
With Black boomers.
Oh, okay.
Black boomers and the Black liberal class, because they sold us out to the police state. They did it back in the 90s when they supported the crime bill, and they did it again when they supported Joe Biden this time. So what liberals will say, remember throughout the course of the campaign, when we would criticize Joe Biden, and in 2016, we criticized Hillary Clinton for their support of the crime bill. So what the liberal class, what they said in response to that was, hey, actually the Black Congressional Caucus, they supported the crime bill too. Yes, that's exactly what we're talking about. Like, there was actually grassroots Black activists who was like, no, this is horrific. Meanwhile, you had the Black Congressional Caucus like, no, this is what we need. We need to get our communities under control. So that's what they do. They sell us out to the police state. They sell us out to Wall Street. They enrich themselves. That's why we got a boom of Black millionaires. But despite the fact that we have more Black millionaires, racial income inequality right now is worse than it was at the height of the Civil Rights Movement. So what happened? We were sold out. Simple as that.
Well, we won't be able to get this piece. Lenin actually wrote about the United States. Like, he has a big thing about United States, and he writes about how, like, the U.S. policy, like, crowded out Black farmers. And what I noticed is, like, since Lenin wrote this in 1915 about how, like, racist America is, he said, shame on America for the way it treats like, he used Negro people because that was the thing. Yeah, and then what you noticed is, since 1915, 100 years later, things have gotten actually worse. There are fewer Black landowners. There are fewer Black farmers, fewer homeowners. So if anything, things have gotten much worse than before.
And that's by design. A lot of people don't understand that. And people ask themselves, how is it possible? Because that's one of those stats that shock you to your core when you realize that financially we're not any better than we was when we was marching in the streets in the 60s. So you ask yourself, why?
If anything, much worse than the 60s. Yeah, much worse off.
Yes. So you tell that to, there was a lot of white liberals I was tell that to. They were like, what? There's no way. So let's examine this, right?
Exactly.
So I wrote about why we should defund the police and the police state. And I love the work you do, because you explain how U.S. imperialism, police state, all these things are interconnected. If you're not focused on U.S. imperialism and the police state as we know it, you're missing a giant part of politics. So that explains why, this also explains why Black wealth takes. So what the police do, they act as an agent that impose regressive taxes on the working class. So then combine that with the fact that they have civil asset forfeiture that steals more money from the working class than criminal burglary does. So when they don't do this, these analysis on a national level, they do it based on the local level. So when I write my paper, I was looking at the percentage of people who was impacted by civil asset forfeiture. No matter what area I looked at Florida, I looked at California, I looked at Texas, because for some reason it's almost impossible to find a national scale of it. You gotta look at
okay. That sounds like something one of our listeners who has a statistics PhD, we need to find that.
We need to find the national.
No. I'm just saying. I know there is a listener of ours who has a statistical PhD. You know who you are. Please compile this because it sounds like a job perfect for your students.
Yeah. So they looked at the percentage of people who was impacted by civil asset forfeiture, and that number always hovered around 55 to 70%. Black people was targeted by civil asset forfeiture. And I see numbers as high as like 80%, 90%. It's insane. So what is happening there? And civil asset forfeiture is like the most egregious example of that. But when you combine that plus fines and fees, tickets, court appearance tickets, and all this kind of stuff, you talking about a giant amount of wealth that being transferred from the Black working class, the Latino working class, because they also targeted a lot by these regressive systems. So what is happening here? That's a giant transfer of wealth from those communities. Where that money going? That money goes mostly to the white bourgeoisie ruling class once you get those fines and fees implemented. So that's just one reason. I can talk about Wall Street, how our Black Congressional Caucus team up with them to help tank Black wealth. I'll bring that up in particular because I want you guys to know that all this stuff is connected. So when you see Black wealth tank, that's because of our police state. So I can go on this.
No, go on. Because like one thing a lot of people don't realize is that when you don't know in America, when you don't know somebody's race, people's imagination just assumes it's white. So in 1948, during the Red Purge, a lot of communists, like most people don't realize this, were like, it was literally a purge of Black people. Like there are so many unions that were majority Black that was purged during the Red Purge. And just because you can't imagine their race, so yes, it has been targeted because I agree with you. So this is why we have this show, is to discuss things. So continue.
Yeah. So that's why I like that you explain that things gotten worse, and they obviously have, because if you look at quality of life that Black Americans live like that, I mean, they can raise a family. I have my grandpa has like 8 kids, 9 kids. I mean, that kind of thought for me is like, like there's no way that's going to happen. That's why the road of Black liberation is being anti-capitalist. So if you're a Black capitalist, you are working on behalf of white supremacy, whether you know it or not.
Well, I mean, it's not okay. So it's not possible. The way capitalism works. Well, a lot of people don't even know that. It's not, capitalism is not where you sell stuff. Capitalism is when you have an automation process that basically crowds up, like impoverishes the entire working class. And that you can't have capitalism without a deliberate impoverishment of like the entire working class. And so, yeah, I agree with you on it seems like there is a lot of, just a lot of misleadership is the best word for it.
You can't have capitalism without slavery.
Yeah.
So they got rid of slavery and then they just changed how they did it. They wrote new Jim Crow laws, then they took advantage of prison slave labor. Hillary Clinton had slaves in their governor mansion in the 80s.
Yes. She wrote it in her book.
Yes. So that's why what you said, you hit the nail on top of the head. You always need that oppressive class. So that's why we're never going to see the disappearance of the military industrial complex, the prison industrial complex, as long as we live in a capitalist system, because those are giant job programs. So if you push someone who's an imperialist enough on the failed strategies of the U.S. imperialism, even if you take their mindset, like, all right, what you guys doing is not working. If you push them enough, they will eventually admit that, we can't slash the military. But I heard this argument multiple times throughout the course of me explaining this. We can't cut the military budget by 70, 80% like you want. What about all the jobs?
have a jobs program. You can have a government can have a jobs program.
Yes.
And the military, like heck, I would even like be okay with paying them just to sit down at home and sleeping.
Yeah, and what they don't understand is if you don't have a jobs program, you can't find a more inefficient way to do it than through the military. Yeah. What I mean by not everyone can serve in the military. So you create a jobs program that excludes a large percentage of the population. Not only that, when you look at the military, they send these people abroad and overseas. How is this actually helping improve in our society? So when you look at what the left is saying, and when we talk about we want to have our jobs program, the jobs programs that we are describing are stuff that will actually help fight climate change. Where we want to hire people, give them great paying jobs so they can implement green climate infrastructure. So these are like progressive ideas in terms of getting people jobs. Meanwhile, the right-wing imperialist way of getting people jobs is shifting them overseas. Once again, not effective. That's why you have 22 U.S. veterans that kill themselves every day. So how effective is a job program when you have people sign up for that? They leave that job program. They're like, my life is worthless now. So there's no rationalization to having these giant military budgets, because you can literally just pay people UBI. Like that's essentially kind of what you kind of laid out there when people stay at home and sleep. That's a kind of a version of a UBI. And then if you have universal health care, there's no reason for people to go to the military because they go to the military so they can get health care. There's also no reason for them to go to the military because they got education.
Well, that is the point, though, because what you have to realize is that a lot of people say that there is no like the American working. This is going to offend many people, but this is the truth. Regardless of your race, white, black, like white working class benefits a lot from imperialism, but everyone inside of America, the standard of living is a little bit high because much higher than it is in the third world. Like there are not children working in coal mine. I mean, in blood mine, whatever. Copper. What's the one mineral they use? I forgot. Whatever the minerals they use. Congo. What is the one? Coltron? Is that it for cell phones? Is that it?
Yeah, I don't know the exact name, but I know exactly what you refer to.
Okay. So what's going on is that this is something I noticed even during the Cold War. Well, you know how the U.S. was like saying, oh my God, we have to fight the communism because of the USSR. Well, the USSR was nowhere to be seen. In Korea, there were no Russians. Vietnam had no Russians. But there were local people. And that's because Russians are like when you're that poor, you don't like these people are willing to die in order to not be oppressed. So the US was basically fighting a war against the working class all over the world because you could see. And the reason why they had to use US troops is because in Korea, for example, they once experimented with Korean troops and they all defected to the genuine Korean side. And so if you look at
they're not going to tell you that, huh?
What?
They're not going to tell you that.
Oh, no. They won't also tell you that there's only one Korean government that has the consent of the Korean people, and it is not the one with the U.S. based in it. But what it is that, like I said, and so that's why they had to, like the U.S., that's why the U.S. had to send its troops. It's because ultimately what it is that it's a way to protect capital and from the barrel of a gun. And what I've interviewed this author. I can say he wrote about how the U.S. police was training people in Jakarta for their death squads, and ultimately it's the same thing here at home. Like in the 70s, they just brought that back home, so it's related. But what people don't understand is worldwide, the only thing that the U.S. is doing is basically upholding the wealth of worldwide, the wealth of the capital class. And so that's why the U.S. needs to go, because you can't there is no way you're going to get local Iraqis to fight for that. Like you're not going to get Koreans to fight for that. And so that's why you send the U.S. Army. But then that's why back in the Cold War, that's why they even make up crap about China. And you're like, China's never bombed a country in about 50 years, maybe. So it's like, yeah. And so again, the U.S. is always fighting the working class, and most Americans somehow can't realize that. I don't know why.
This is what you just laid out there. This is exactly why I tell people the United States is the most propagandized country in the world. And it's not even close to me. Not even close.
Not even close.
Other people bring up other countries, you know, the one that everyone always likes to attack. They're like, what about China? What about North Korea? People don't even understand the history of what the United States has done. So you have people that say, well, socialism doesn't work. Communism doesn't work. Those same people don't even know that we're the reason why we're destabilizing these countries. So there is such a massive education gap, and there's people who don't even understand basic things like the history of the CIA. I tell people, if you don't understand the history of the CIA, you don't know U.S. history at all. So you have a giant percentage of the population who don't know the history of economics in terms of capitalism versus socialism. You have literally, I don't know what the number is. What do you think it is? Like 90, 95%?
God knows. I don't even know.
God knows how many people who don't know this stuff. So when I listen to what you're saying, I'm like, this makes sense to me. But if the average person hears this, they so propagandized. They're like, what'd she just say? Because I know I have these kind of conversations with people all the time while I tell them how U.S. is the most propagandized country in the world.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then they ask me why, and I'm like, all right. So, and then I'll literally just lay out stuff that they don't know. And then I ask them, why you don't think you know that? why do you think you have this version of an event, even though that was not true? Why do you believe that America is the best country in the world, even though they don't provide healthcare to the citizens? So there are some countries, this is the biggest thing. There are some countries that know that they're watching state TV. So when you turn the TV on, you know you're getting news from the point of view of the state. But meanwhile, Americans, they turn on CNN, they turn on MSNBC, and they think they are getting legit, unbiased news. So that's the difference. At least other people know they get state TV. Americans think they're actually getting real, unbiased news sources watching corporate news. That's the difference.
Well, one more thing is that Mao mentions this. Lenin kind of little mentions it, but Gramsci mentions this a lot. But depending on how impoverished a population is, like there's only so much you can. Okay, so Orwell mentioned this. Like he said something like Hitler can say that the Jews started the war if he wins, but for the purpose of ballistics, he has to make 2 + 2 = 4. He can't make it equal 5. So there's a limit. And inside the imperial core, because there's infinite number of commodities coming in, there is so much more that a country can lie about than outside of the imperial core. So like a third world country, it's like incredible, like their government, even their state TV, there's a small limit as to how they can lie. And so a lot of because of the fact that this is the core of the empire, the government can get away with lying because of how isolated and how everyone is. And so basically the reason why the US media lies more is because they can get away with it. In India, you can't get away with half the lies. So even the state TVs like kind of mostly tells the truth.
Not only do they get away with the lies in America, they get promoted. The people who told the truth about war, those are the people who got fired. The people who told the line,
Bill Donahue.
They will, absolutely. They get promoted. The people who debunk Russiagate, they don't get time on cable news. Meanwhile, Rachel Maddow puts a false story for 2 years regarding Russian bounties, like in Russiagate in general for like last 5-6 years. So, and now look at her. She's a multimillionaire. She's the darling of the liberal class. So not only is there no consequences to her lying in terms of the establishment makes your career. It's always, like I'll be in a much more lucrative position if I decide to just lie on behalf of the Democratic Party. Like you see a lot of Black people in media what they do. So that's the problem with American propaganda, because not only do they spread lies, if you're better at spreading lies, you get rewarded for it. Once again, I don't even have to attack just the liberal class. You had Bill O'Reilly, who kept repeating during his rise in stardom. He repeated and made his claim to fame by repeating the WMD. Yeah, WMD. I don't know why he's saying that. Weapons of mass destruction. He was spreading that lie throughout the course of his career. And was there any punishment or anything that he got in retaliation? And no, he was made a TV star. So this is the kind of stuff that we deal with when it comes to massive propaganda. And once again, like the police state and U.S. imperialism, that's kind of my go-to. And just to lay this out for anyone who's watching, to let you understand how propagandized Americans are. You have people who consider themselves to be allies. They're not. They consider themselves to be allies, but they still argue in the year 2021 that the police protects and serve the Black community. People argue that with a legit, like straight dead ass. They will say that because they are programmed from day one. I'll talk to my friend CJ from Fred Legends. He was with his toddler, and they were watching a kids show. And then during that kids show, he turned it off because they were feeding a pro-cop message to a 3-year-old. So it starts when you're a toddler. Like you watch these little small TV channels, these kids shows, and they always have these public officials like police. They hold them in high regard. It starts from there when you're a toddler. Then you watch Rush Hour, you watch Die Hard. You see what's them shows, them crime shows that be on TV? I can't name them.
NYPD Blue, Law and Order.
Yeah, NYPD Blue. Like there's an entire list of them. And these programs, so we talk about American news, but not just what happens in the newsrooms. It's what you see on TV, what you read in books. This is why if you look at the giant picture, that's why the U.S. is easily the most propagandized country, because through the media. It wasn't until we had internet video, even then it took a long time to call away a lot of people from this idea. And they still believe it to this day, despite all the evidence to the contrary that they're like some sort of steward of the Black community. Because when the defund the police movement started, you had people like Al Sharpton, the Black liberal class who dragged people to the right. Barack Obama came out against it as well. He got dragged. And what they were saying the people who want to defund the police, the people who want to abolish the police, they're just white liberals who are disconnected from the Black community, and they're just doing this because they want to sound cool. That was Al Sharpton said. That was a lot of the Black leaders saying, like, this is white people who are leading us off the cliff. Meanwhile, if you actually look at the numbers from day one, even when defund the police was at its most unpopular during the beginning of the summer, you know who supported defund the police from the very beginning? Black people.
Who were affected by it.
Yeah, Black people, Latinos, and Democrats. But meanwhile, if you turn on and listen to one of these corporate talking heads, they were spinning it in the exact opposite way.
Yeah.
They were saying that it was white people who supported it, but Black people were like, no, we understand that we got to support our community. This is the level of propaganda that we deal with. Okay. So if you only get your news from that, you're not going to know what's going on.
I'm going to get in trouble for this, but I say that, okay, so there's I call it denazify the police.
Denazify the police?
Yeah. But that is equivalent, like, because the thing about it is that people don't realize it's not just a few bad apples. It's literally, they had I will link to this. Listen to my episode with Stuart Schrader about the history of the modern police. Literally, we had former Nazis training our police, and their entire purpose is what they call counterinsurgency. And counterinsurgency is basically protecting the rich people from poor people.
Absolutely, well said. Well said. So,
yeah,
if anyone believes that there's such thing as a good cop, so the most recent example is Derek Chauvin. So now Derek Chauvin was prosecuted or whatever. So now they're trying to pretend that this is a win. Like once again, our propaganda state is already in action. They said, "Oh, see, this is proof." Once again, as soon as the conviction happened, there was a story how you had Democrats and Republicans that were telling people, "This is why we don't actually really need that much police reform." Now you see, you won. We got the police officer.
No, you got a sacrificial lamb.
Yes, amen. Well said. So if you think there's a good cop, you gotta remember this. Derek Chauvin was not turned in by his peers.
Video.
The only reason that why Derek Chauvin was even got in trouble because he got this viral video. But in 2017, he did literally the same thing. I know this because there was just a story that came out today that now that he's the sacrificial lamb, they are deciding to press charges on him from an incident from 2017 where he punched a kid so hard he had to go to a dentist and he put his knee on his neck. He did the same thing he did to George Floyd, but with the physical assault as well. But the police officer,
did the kid survive?
Yeah, he's okay. But I didn't look into his injuries, but he got messed up pretty bad.
Okay.
But he didn't face any consequences for that. And so Derek Chauvin had a long history of being physically abusive to people and being openly corrupt. But meanwhile, there's no cop that said anything about him until he became a public figure. So are you telling me that there's a good cop when they ignore what Derek Chauvin going on? If you have 90 good cops, but 10 bad cops, you got 100 bad cops. It's just that simple because they wasn't turned against them until they had the public pressure when they had to. And even then, they didn't want to. They just had to do it.
Exactly. Actually, I'm glad you brought this up because today's piece that we're going to read, it's so creepily similar to the whole George Floyd, Derek Chauvin case, that you would hardly believe it's in Tsarist Russia. But what I do want to explain is that if there is like a case dissimilar in Tsarist Russia, which is a monarchy, maybe we don't exactly live in a democracy. It's like one thing that is that like there were 4 cops with the video from what I recall. I won't put the video because it's too graphic, but only one of them got charged. What happened to the other 4? Do you know?
I actually do not remember. I actually got to look into that because I remember when this first happened, they was thinking about pressing charges on the other police officers in the area. Mm-hmm. That was something that would be.
No, they were not in the area. They were on top of George Floyd.
Yeah, I remember a long time ago I heard that they may be charged, but I don't know the follow-up to that story. Because I read that a long time ago. They said they may face charges as well, but I don't know what happened to them. So that's a good question.
Yeah, because it seems like they picked George. Is that his name, George? No. Derek.
Yeah, Derek Chauvin.
Derek. I can't remember.
Yeah, Derek. I'm not good with names either. So
okay. Sorry. Okay, Derek Chauvin. They picked him as because on the scene there were 4 other police officers, and we don't know what happened to those 4 police officers. And the system is so corrupt in that there isn't a centralized database, and there is no mandatory reporting. There is no, and of course we all know that the politicians are afraid of the cops because it's kind of like a protection ring. Even Bill de Blasio from here in New York. So it's, I'm pretty sure that the other 4, I don't know what happened to them, but we'll have to check on that. And we'll probably
3 of them have upcoming trials. I think they all, I want to say, I know at least 2 of them are no longer cops. I'm not sure.
That's good.
Okay. That's good to know. At least some of them may get punished. But the reason why we can't, even when there's a video, there's no conviction is because the prosecutor, look at the trial transcripts and you'll see the prosecutor 9 out of 10 times, just tanks the case by overcharging, they charged them wrongly. They kind of they basically let them run the show. So
yeah, that's why the carceral state is a joke, because the whole idea that you're going to reform the carceral state. So what does a reform mean? And this is why you can't reform ICE either. So in order to have an active reform, you must have administrative overhead. So who is the administrative overhead? And the people who will look into the police and people who look into ICE. These are the same people who made their career from the bottom and they worked their way up. So they know a lot of people that they are supposed to be holding accountable. So I can give a very vague example. Imagine if someone was working as a police officer for 10 years, and then they eventually became the person who to investigate the police. They have those embedded relationships already. They may know the police captain. They may know Billy on the force. So they are less likely to actually hold these people accountable because they already had a built-in relationship. They're already being naturally corrupted. That's the same thing that happened to ICE as well, because ICE is supposed to have DHS overhead over them. But they've been caught forging signatures. They've been caught lying about documents. But there's no one on the overhead that try to bust them because they have no interest in doing that. Because if they bust them, they make their entire agency look bad. So this basic human corruption is why people who advocate for reforms, they are missing a giant piece. And they're missing why that doesn't work. Because a lot of people forget that Minneapolis, they reformed the police department 6 years ago. 5 years before Derek Chauvin killed the guy. Reforms don't work because you need a sufficient power structure to enforce those reforms. And that's not going to happen when we have this mafia known as the police force. You had countless police whistleblowers who said it's a protection system where you don't rat on your boy. You don't snitch on your boy. That's why Derek Chauvin got away with what he got away with for such a long time. You can't rely on the system to govern itself.
Oh yeah, but okay. For me, this is my thing with a lot of these liberals who talk about abolish the police. Is that in order to abolish the police, you kind of have to get rid of capitalism. So they're not making the fight more they're not bringing more issues to tie in with this. They're just focusing narrowly on the police.
Yeah, that's why. Yeah. Sorry. That's why I tell people that defund the police is a path to abolition. And when you say defund the police and police abolition in general is inherently an anti-capitalist construct, like you lay out. So the main concept coming from an anarchist point of view, that's why I think that's a pretty accurate description of myself, is we need government that justifies itself. So when you have a universal healthcare system, that's a system that justifies itself because you're uplifting communities, you're saving money instead of spending all this money on massive insurance systems. Meanwhile, you have people spending all this money on giant police budgets, but not getting anything in return, meaning you're spending a lot of money on police budgets, but crime is still going up. Crime is not going down. So you make a good point, because if you actually follow the road to abolition, we want to take money from the police force and then spend that on a lot of these social welfare programs like housing, healthcare. And these are the kind of things that reduce crime naturally. And that's how you disband the police state, because that's why we say defund the police is a road to abolition. Because once you defund the police and once you have these systems put in place, crime will reduce, and then people will realize we don't need this fascist police state, will lead to police abolition. So there's a lot of people who push for abolition who don't understand that necessary that construct. Like, you understand that this coming from our capitalist system now, there's a path to get there, but a lot of people don't necessarily understand that path.
Well, yeah, I would say that path is written in a cute little book by Lenin called "What Is to Be Done," because, you cannot have. It is not an easy fight, because you are basically fighting the what do you call the police? The something of capital. What is it? Somebody? Pat Harrington called them something of capital. What did they call them? Oh, whatever. It doesn't matter. We'll figure that out. With that, we should begin this piece. It's called by Lenin. You're going to love this because it's so relevant. It's like, so another thing that a lot of people in America don't understand is wisdom, in that, yes, your elders in America don't know crap and they're always wrong. So you probably shouldn't listen to old American people. But that doesn't mean that people from other cultures are the reason why we still need to read Lenin after 100 years is because he's always right. But anyways, are you ready to start?
Okay, on January 23rd in Nizhny, that's my best.
Yeah, that's good enough. Good.
The special presence of the Moscow court chamber with the participation of state representatives considered the case of the murder of the peasant Timofey Well, I tried.
Okay, it's Timofey Vasilievich Vozdukov.
Man, I really want to get better at reading these names. I really do.
No, you don't have to.
I'll get there one day.
These are Russian names. Yeah, what it's transliterated, so it's not really. It's harder to do Russian names because they're transliterated. Not.
Yeah, I might learn that skill one day. Who was sent to a sobering upstation and was beaten there by 4 police officers.
Shelmetev, Shulpin, Shibayev, and Olkovin.
And the acting police officer, Panov, right?
Yep.
I feel like I'm saying all these things super American to such an extent that Vozdukov, man, I'll say this differently every time I say it, died the very next day in the hospital. So he died after the attack because that's how brutal it was. That's what's said in the first paragraph. Such is the simple tale of this case, which throws a glaring light upon what usually and always goes on in our police stations. As far as can be gathered from the extremely brief newspaper reports, what appears to have happened is the following. Then we have a nice picture of the governor's house.
Yeah, go ahead.
On 420, he drove up to the governor's house in a cab. The caretaker of the governor's house, who came out, testified at the trial that he was without a hat.
That was the cover. Go ahead.
Vozdukov. Am I saying that right? I need to learn.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Just say fine. Yeah, Vozdukov. I'll say it. Just pause and I'll say it. Okay.
Okay. All right. Sounds good.
Hold on. The reason why without a hat is that because Vozdukov was merely a peasant and a commoner and kind of like a slave, it was like a sign of disrespect towards the governor who's related to the Tsar. But go ahead.
Okay. Wow. He had been drinking but not drunk. He complained about some steamboat wharf that did not issue a ticket for passage. The caretaker ordered
Shelemetyev.
The policeman on post duty to take him to the station.
Vozdukov.
Was so little drunk that he calmly talked to
Shelemetyev.
And on arrival, clearly explained his name and rank to the warden, Panov.
I kind of like it where he's making. So in Russian, he says, "Mnoga." Let me get this right. It's really funny because they were arguing. Okay, this guy was totally drunk, and that's why, and being belligerent. And then so Lenin's like, he was so little drunk. So not drunk that he had drunk so little that he was able to calmly talk to the police and explain everything. So go on.
How many languages? I'm gonna get back to it. How many languages are you fluent in? I'm curious.
Huh?
Sorry, I'm getting off topic. I was just asking. I was just curious. How many languages are you fluent in?
I'm not fluent in Russian. I'm just learning this. I've been learning.
It sounds like it.
No. I'm not. I just because the original translation was so bad. Yesterday, I went over with my Russian teacher. I'm fluent in Kannada, which is a South Indian language, and I speak Spanish and English. I'm learning Russian, and I've been learning it for 8 months. I'm not at all. I don't even think I'm conversational. I'm like barely literate, is what I say.
So that's 4 languages you got.
Three. And then I'm learning Russian.
Okay. I was just curious. I still want to learn a language one day. That's definitely.
Well, I always say if you're going to learn a language, learn an enemy language. So I would suggest like Russian, Chinese, Persian. What's another enemy state? Whatever.
Because I was trying to learn. Sorry, go ahead.
Half the time, like I just notice things. Like, for example, like you don't need to know anything but the Russian alphabet, and then you'll know that something's written in Ukrainian or Russian because Ukraine has the letter I, and Russian has the backwards N. And so half the time, sometimes in CNN report, they say something's going on in Russia, and you see signs in Ukrainian, and it's like, no, you're in the wrong country. Like, and with Chinese, we don't even have like everything. Like half the things are mistranslated. Like the amount of time things they just like mistranslate or just get wrong that anyone with a basic language skill can figure out is overwhelming. So I always tell leftists, always learn the language of one of the enemy states.
That's very interesting. I know I wanted to learn Portuguese because I wanted to go to Brazil and train jiu-jitsu with authentic Brazilian head coach. So that's my personal bias, but I want to learn.
No, you should absolutely. When Lula comes back, they'll be mistranslating him too very soon.
But sorry, I got off road. Let me get back to the.
No, go ahead. So we're on arriving at the police station.
On arriving at the police station, he quite distinctly told Sergeant Panov his name and his occupation. In spite of this,
Shelemetyev,
evidently with the knowledge of Panov, who had just questioned
Voskudov,
pushed the latter not into the prisoner's room where there were some of the drunkards, but into the soldier's room, which was situated near the prisoner's room.
Okay, this part gets very familiar. The only difference between American police and Tsarist Russian police is the weapon. But read this; you'll find this to be so familiar. The next paragraph.
Shelemetyev.
Yeah,
I tried.
That's good enough. Shelemetyev. Okay, go for it.
Shelemetyev. Well, I don't know. This one's hard to me. His sword. Vostokov. Also, I'm kind of curious. That's why I'm trying to learn these names. His sword got caught on the latch of the door, and it cut his hand slightly. Imagining that Vostokov was holding a sword, he rushed at him and struck him. Wait, what?
Yeah. So, baby, you know how like police in America say, "Oh my God, he was like grabbing for my gun, and that's why I shot him." This is the same exact story, except with his sword.
Shouting that his hand had been cut, he struck Volkanov with all his might in the face, in the chest, and the side. He struck him so hard that Volkanov fell, striking his forehead on the floor and begging for more mercy. Kind of similar to George Floyd, isn't it?
It's exactly like you'll see even when you get even. So yeah,
I see it already. Because George Floyd was crying out for his mom and saying he can't breathe, and now you have this guy saying, "Why are you hitting me?" So that's very sad. According to the statement of a witness, Seth Minkin, who was in the neighboring cell at the time, it was not my fault. Forgive me.
What the cop said. Go ahead.
Volkanov said, "It was not my fault. Forgive me for Christ's sake." According to the evidence of his witness, it was not Volkanov who'd been drunk, but Shelmatev. Shelmatev colleagues Chopin and Shaiba have been continuously drinking in the police station since the first day of the Easter week. 420 was Tuesday, the third day of Easter week. They learned that Shelmatev was teaching the expression used in the indictment, Volkanov a lesson. They went into the soldiers' lockup accompanied by Okovin, who was on a visit from another station, and attacked Volkanov with their fists and feet. Police Sergeant Polnov came on the scene and struck Volkanov on the head with a book and then with his fist.
Yep.
Wow. Oh, they beat him so hard that my belly ached for pity. Once again, very, very similar. There's some people who saw the George Floyd incident and they said they had PTSD, and I 100% believe that. So that's kind of what you see what this woman said here. Said a woman witness who was under arrest there at the time. She was under arrest?
Yeah, because it was Tsarist Russia. So what happened? Yeah. It's a lot like the U.S. in that. Oh, it's actually kind of creepy. I'll explain the connection. But so slavery is very unpopular for people who are slaves, right? So Tsarist Russia had like a feudal. It was almost like it was a feudal system. So they had to have like a huge police force that would like beat up, like imprison people who would like refuse to work or strike or anything. So they had a huge, basically poor people, whenever they stood up for their rights, they would be sent to jail there.
Sound very familiar to me.
Yep.
All right, let's see. What did I leave off at?
When the lesson was over.
Oh, when the lesson was over, the sergeant very coolly ordered Shaibayev to wipe the blood off from the victim's face. It would not look so bad then. The chief might see it and then flung him into the common cell. Brothers, cried Volkanov to the other detainees, see how the police have beaten me. Be my witness. I lodge a complaint. But he never lived to lodge a complaint. The following morning, he was found in a state of unconsciousness and sent to the hospital, where he died within 8 hours without coming to himself again. A post-mortem revealed 10 broken ribs, bruises all over his body, and hemorrhage of the brain. Yikes. The court sentenced Shelmatov, Chopin, and Shabayev to 4 years penal servitude, and Okhovin and Panov to 1 month's detention. 1 month detention, finding them guilty only of insulting behavior.
Yep, that sounds like exactly what happens to police in the US all the time. Like they always get off on anything they do.
Hell, a lot of them get paid vacations.
Yes, exactly. So it's actually worse than Tsarist Russia. So
yeah, so they pretty much know they're gonna get off. I have this name on right on top of my head. The latest person. Damn man, I missed. Oh, Jacob, the person who killed Jacob Blake. I think that was him. I hope I'm not getting that wrong. But anyway, there was just someone who was just killed by the police, and then the police officer was let off. And then if you read the story, every case. Yeah, when you look at the story, they gave him paid vacation, and then they let him off, and he rejoined the police force. So what essentially just happened? He just got a vacation for killing someone. That's all that happened.
Yeah, and what people like don't realize is that the ones that even get prosecuted are the ones like are so bad. There's some like video or like 10,000 witnesses. Like imagine how many we have these unsolved murders that like, or just people who disappear that we don't know. And they so for everyone, I say that for every one that gets prosecuted, there are probably like 50 incidents of like that we just that go into the black hole.
Yeah. It's only the people they absolutely like, even with massive propaganda, they can't defend. And that's something that made me very, very upset about Trump because Trump, before he left office, he started giving a lot of pardons to war criminals. And a lot of U.S. soldiers who commit heinous actions, just like the police, they get away with it because they got a system of protection. I don't remember this guy's name, so I apologize for this. But one of the people that Trump pardoned, he got convicted. Yeah, he got convicted because he was so crazy.
Like a serial killer.
Yeah, he was so crazy. Like I bring that up only because that's the kind of stuff you gotta do in order to get convicted by a police state and by a military industrial complex. I didn't read much more into him, but he was like,
absolutely. He was literally a serial killer. His name was Gallagher, and there was a kid who was perfectly fine. He came to him, and he had basically killed a little kid. So I know who you're talking about, and that's what I say. Like, it's like a lot of people don't realize systemic impunity, but this is what it is. The way they go crazy for it doesn't matter. They'll just like shoot. There's no one watching. I mean, no one who has power who's watching. So you'll never know what's going on. Maybe 20 years later, you'll find out. But
I don't follow these stories that often because they break my heart. But these stories release like almost every week or two, where there's a story of a black man who's been serving prison. The media, they frame the story as a feel-good story. They were like, George, who's been in prison for 30 years, just now been released because the police officer finally admitted that he lied in evidence. I'm like, that's not a good feel-good story. This guy had his entire life robbed from him. So whenever I see those stories, I'm like, imagine how many people like that are in prison, but their story never gets out. That's why when you bring up the fact that every time there's one police officer that's been convicted, imagine how many people didn't get justice. Even though the one police officer that's been convicted. That's how I feel whenever I read those stories. And once again, I don't read them now because they really turn me off.
No, I can never do the innocent ones. Like that, just like I just start bawling out and crying.
I can't deal with it. I'm a softie at heart.
No, I can't do it. The innocent ones, like I just can't deal with that. Like it just like makes me balls out crying. But yeah, and then what you have to also realize is that I think U.S. has about 2 million people under the penal system who are actually providing free labor to private prison companies. So, I mean, I don't even know what to say about it besides that it's a huge problem that we need to figure out.
Yeah, exactly. I'll get back to the article now. I just read about how they got 4 years.
So it says, with this sentence, we shall commence the examination of our case. So
okay. Those sentenced to penal servitude were charged according to Articles 346 and 1490, Part 2 of the Penal Code. Article 346 provides an official inflicting wounds or injury in the exercises of his duty is liable to the maximum penalty reserved for the perpetration. I stumbled on that one. Of such a crime. Article 1490, Part 2, provides for a penalty of 8 to 10 years penal servitude for inflicting torture resulting in death. So if I get this paragraph right, what they're saying is that those police officers should have been charged more. Is that what they're saying here?
Well, you'll see. Wait till the next. Okay, Lenin explains. Lenon's never not explaining. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. In other words, it set the maximum reduction allowed by the law in case of extenuating circumstances, and also set the lowest penalty in its lowest degree. In short, the court did everything it could to mitigate the fate of the defendants. Yep, sounds familiar. And even more than it could, since the capital punishment law was circumvented. We do not mean, of course, to say that ultimate justice required exactly 10 years of hard labor rather than 4. What is important is that the murderers were found murderers and sentenced to hard labor. But we cannot fail to note characteristic tendency of the courts of crown judges and class representatives. When they judge police officials, they are ready to lend them every kind of leniency. Yep. When they judge for offenses against the police, they are known to be adamantly harsh.
Literally nothing. I mean.
So that reminds me of the story. And I need to do a follow-up on this. I don't know if
you should. Tell them.
Actually, I don't know if I want to, because I remember during the George Floyd protest, there was a story of how someone he was getting charged with 20 years to life in prison because they said he threw a Molotov or something like that. And they were like, a
bottle of water.
Yeah, they said they accused him of throwing a Molotov, but there's no evidence that he did that. But he did throw something that hit the police car, and they said that was they are charging him with deadly assault on a police officer. So he was getting charged 20 to 25 years. 20 to life. And I don't know the follow to the story, but the reason I bring that up because what this paragraph is saying that if a police officer does something to you, they get very minimum punishment, and then if you do anything to a police officer, you can get harshly punished. So I always want to tell people like that person may get life in prison for throwing like a water bottle at a police car. Meanwhile, someone can be convicted of rape and get less than that. So just to understand the scale, a rapist can get less time in prison than someone who throws something at a police car. So no,
absolutely. This happens all the time. So they have, about the blue in they have these blue lives law, like in Louisiana, like Democrats actually colluded last year or the year before to do this Blue Lives Matter law, where basically it enhances, but even a small alleged thing that happened to a police officer, they enhance it. So it's like I can show you 10,000 different examples of this happening in the U.S. all the time.
Yep, and I've seen videos when I do my research on the police abolition article. We see how they treat Black people who are not even resisting arrest. It's just very they may misfollow a police officer's command, which is not resisting arrest. Meanwhile, I've seen videos, and this is why the police uphold racial hierarchies, because I've seen videos of white dudes doing insane stunts of resisting the police. Like there was a video, this guy was running around, like pushing the police officer on the ground, and it was a white guy. He got off on it. So that's another reason why people need to understand that these systems are designed to uphold those racial hierarchies and keep people of color and other minority classes in their place. Because a white person can do something and they can get straight off of it. Meanwhile, a Black person can get in. They will get killed for doing like half of what that guy did.
Okay, I'm going to give you minor pushback. I've also seen a video. Oh my God, it's really heartbreaking. His name is, I can't remember, in Arizona, Daniel Silver or something, like where the police like had him do Simon Says and confused him and basically shot him because he wanted to. Nothing happened. But what I notice is that the police's thing is always upholding those in power. Like, so for now, the ones that are most likely to be a threat is people of color, but soon it's going to come back to like they're not like white people are not going to be exempt for that much longer is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. That's a good point. But another thing to consider is there was studies that was done how you had a lot of white supremacists that infiltrated the police.
Oh, yeah.
So when I say that they are less likely to use lethal force on white people, there's that inherent bias where they believe that white person is less of a threat than a Black person.
Exactly.
So you did bring up a good point about how it is about class and power, but there's some people who are able to get away with it because they may run into a white supremacist cop who are more likely to give them the benefit of the doubt. Meanwhile, they will just pull the trigger on a Black man.
Absolutely.
That's a good point. That's a good point, though.
No, you're absolutely right. But they're also that's because this is what I think. I think it's because Black people are the most oppressed in society. So if they were to if everyone who was, there's 14 million Black people, right? Or maybe 12 million? How many are there?
I don't know the exact number.
Yeah, 12%, whatever, 12%.
Yeah, 12% of, yeah.
So millions. If they all got together, they can actually have a serious threat to capital. So they want to keep them isolated and fractured. And so, so I think they target Black people more because they perceive Black people as a bigger threat to the capitalist system.
And also they can get away with it the most. That's why why Black people was I brought up civil asset forfeiture. But there's a lot of people who put legal challenges to the police. There's been people that got a lot of money back because a lot of police, what they do, they illegally siege these assets. But the problem is if you're poor Black, actually if you're poor anywhere, but especially if you're poor Black, you are less likely to be able to mount a legal defense. So what they do, they drown you out. So instead of you able to mount that pushback, they just get away with illegally stealing your stuff. But I looked at analysis, I need to find the link, where there's a very high percentage of people who were able to put legal claims who got their resources back. So that does back up your point of it being a class base. And that's why.
No. Hold on. I'm saying it's okay. I'm saying that I think that's not what I meant to say. I'm sorry.
Okay, I see. I misunderstood you.
I'm trying to say that the way in America race is defined is based on class power. Like, so Black people, like so Black people will be the most oppressed because of just the way history has happened in the past 200 to 300 years. And so I think that when Black people, if Black people were to like put together a challenge, they are like capital sees them as a bigger threat, if that makes sense.
Yes, I agree with you 100%.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I see. I misunderstood what you said at first, but I got you. Let's go back to the article.
Okay, but read the footnote at the end of this. Okay, footnote 2, but go ahead.
I'm trying to find where I left off. So I think I was at leniency.
We are adamantly harsh, and now we're to the warden.
To the warden. Well, how could he not be lenient? He met Volkanov, who was brought in. He obviously ordered him not to be sent to prison, but first for training to the soldiers' room. He took part in the beating with his fist in a book, which must be a law book. He ordered the destruction of traces of crime to wash out the blood. He reported to the returning bailiff of this unit, Mukhanov, on the night of April 20, that everything was going well in the unit under his command, literally. But he had nothing to do with the murderers. He was guilty only of insult by action, only a simple offense by action, punishable by arrest. It is only natural that this gentleman, Mr. Panov, who is innocent of the murder, should serve at the present as a should serve at the present as a police detachment officer. Mr. Panov has only transferred his useful administrative activity of educating the common people from the city to the countryside.
This reminds me, so basically, after like a slap on the wrist, they transfer him from Nizhny Novgorod, which is near Moscow, to like a little farther east over.
Yeah. Okay.
Tell
me, in good conscience, reader, can Panov otherwise understand the sentence of the chamber as advice? Go ahead and hide the traces of the crime better. Educate so there is no trace. You order to wash the blood off his face of a dying man. That is very good, but you let Volkanov die. That, brother, is inconsiderate. Go ahead and be more careful and take the first and last commandment of the Russian
Desimordov. I'll explain later.
Desimordov. Firmly in your nose. Beat, but not to death.
Okay, but I agree. So Lenin is saying that just because Panov got like such a small like slap on the wrist and he got away, the moral of the story is don't beat people. It's just that you have to beat, but not to death. And the Russian Desimorda is basically a story from Nicholas Gogol, I believe, about a police, a boorish, insolent oppressor and a man of violence. But it's really funny. Like, yeah, and this is exactly what, like, sometimes this is what I see with those, like, camera things is that, it's basically saying beat, but not to death. This one's really fun. Yeah. So basically the judge, so Lenin's saying, right now, based on this sentence, this is what, if I were Panov, the lesson I'd learn is to beat, but not to death. Okay, so go on.
Okay, so let's see. From the human point of view.
Notice he says the human point of view as opposed to the police point of view.
Oh, yeah, I like that.
Nice passive aggressive.
Because they are strict of their humanity. That makes sense. Mm-hmm. The chamber's verdict on Panov is a direct mockery of justice. It shows a purely servile desire to shift all the blame into the lower police officers and to shield their immediate superior. Very interesting point. With whose knowledge, approval, and participation in the brutal torture took place. From the legal point of view, however, this verdict is an example of the kind of causality.
I don't know what that means. Let me check that. Like Lenin's like.
I've never seen that word before.
Me neither. Okay, hold on. Let's check that word. Hold on. Casuistry is a process of reasoning that seeks to resolve moral problems by extracting or extending theoretical rules from a particular case and reapplying those rules to new instances.
of the judge. Okay, interesting. I'm gonna say
I did not. No. It seems like it's like it seems like it's like a branch of philosophy. I had no idea. I'll send it to you. I'll via chat for later if you want to look it up. But whoa, I had no idea. Okay.
All right. Which the judge officials themselves, not very far removed from the magistrate, are capable. Language was given to man in order to hide his thoughts, diplomats say. The law was made to distort the notion of guilt and responsibility. Our lawyers say, I like that. What indeed is the finest judicial art required to frame participation in torture as a mere offense by an act? The handyman, who on the morning of April 20th knocked maybe a hat off Volkanov, turned out to be guilty of the same offense, and even weaker, not an offense, but a violation, as Panov was. Even mere participation in a fight rather than beating a helpless person, if someone's death is caused, is subject to a harsher punishment than that to which the policeman was subjugated.
Exactly. So what Lenin's saying is that, like, when if two people, like back in Tsarist Russia, if two random like peasants were fighting each other and it resulted in the death, that peasant who was alive, who was fighting, would have gotten way more prison time than just like 1 month.
Yeah, exactly. The judges took advantage of the fact that the law prescribes several penalties for torture and exercise of office, giving the judge, depending on the circumstances of the case, the choice between prison from 2 months and exile to Siberia to live. This is, of course, a very reasonable rule, and for this reason, our professors of criminal law have more than once praised the Russian law and emphasized its liberation.
Liberalism.
I don't know why I read that.
Okay, so Lenin always mocks intellectuals and professors. So Lenin's very seething about this, and we've seen this here in America too. Every talking head on Fox or CNN who's like, "This case is actually, I don't know, this is not manslaughter, but this does not have pre-deliberation or predeterminate, blah blah blah." Like, you've seen them like do like legal verbal maneuvering.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so that why I always tell people that those elite academia dudes, they're not really smart. They just learn propaganda.
Yes, that's exactly what Lenin would say too.
Oh yes, see, I honestly haven't read a lot of Lenin, but I feel like we definitely vibe.
You're gonna love Lenin. Is the great thing about Lenin is just like this, he's hilarious. Like, he'll make you laugh all the time. So, and then you learn so much. Like, you learn how to actually do good journalism. You learn how to do data analysis. There's so much to learn from him, and he's hilarious on top of it. So
they neglected to mention the little detail that the application of sound legal rules require judges who are not reduced to the position of mere officials. That it requires a participation of representatives of society in court and of public opinion in a discussion of the case. Secondly, the assistant public prosecutor came to the court's aid by refusing to accuse Panov and Okhoven of torture and cruelty, and by asking them only for causing offense.
Okay, so this is this happens in the U.S. system where he said the assistant public prosecutor helped Panov by basically saying, we're not going to charge him with how Lenin mentioned 2 articles, article something 14. Let me remember what the 2 articles were. Article 346 and 1490. They only charged him with article 346 is opposed to 1490, which is exactly what happens in the prosecutor undercharges police all the time. And I've seen little children getting charged with crazy stuff for schoolyards. There was this movie, don't watch if you can't handle it, it'll break your heart. It's called Kids for Cash. And you'll see these little girls being charged for basically a schoolyard fight or whatever. And so, this is the same exact thing where he's only getting charged for insulting, offensive behavior or something, but not for murder or torture and cruelty. So
yeah. I know exactly what you mean, because that dynamic you just explained is the prison to school pipeline.
That's it. Okay, so sorry.
Yeah, that's pretty much what they do, and unfortunately, Black girls are I'm trying to remember the statistics. Hopefully, I'm not getting wrong. It's 3 or 4 times more likely to be arrested for doing the same exact thing that like a white girl was doing. So they use that to get not only just black girls, but people of color into the penal system. That's exactly what that's designed to do. That's why they charge people at school. All right, say, what was I? I keep losing my spot. Liberalism, second.
Yep, that right
secondly, the assistant public prosecutor came to the court's aid by refusing to accuse Panov of torture and cruelty, and by asking to punish him only for. Oh yeah, I read it already. He referred in turn to expert reports which denied that the beating by Panov were particularly severe and lasted for an extended period of time.
Hold on, let's just remember that Panov beat him with a book. Really, and books back then, I'm going to put it, were hard, thick, and leather bound, and they were very, very, it's like beating somebody with a stick, basically. Go ahead.
The legal sophism, am I saying that right?
Yes, sophism, yeah.
Yeah, as you see, is not too complicated. Since Panov beat less than others, we can say that his beatings were not especially painful. And if they were not especially painful, we can conclude that they did not amount to torment and cruelty. And if they did not amount to torment and cruelty, then it was a simple insult by action. Everything is settled to everyone's satisfaction, and Mr. Panov remains in the ranks of the guardians of order and well-being.
That sounds, it's like we're living in a Tsarist. Okay, so this footnote I kind of want to read. The footnote 2 says that a few days after the Vozdukov murder trial, the Moscow district tried a private in the local artillery for stealing 50 pairs of trousers and a few pair of boots. And the sentence was 4 years of penal servitude for just stealing some boots. Okay. So that's what happens when you steal things in Tsarist Russia and in America, which is astonishingly similar to Tsarist Russia.
Meanwhile, if you are a white-collar criminal and you're responsible for the theft of millions and billions of dollars, nothing happens. So once again, you are protecting the capitalist class with our laws. Even once again, they can break it all they want, but doesn't really apply to them. Anyway, okay, we have now touched upon the question of participation of representatives of society in the trial and role of public opinion. This question is perfectly illustrated by the case. First of all, why was the case tried not by a jury, but by the court of crown judges with class representatives? Because the government of Alexander III, undergoing a merciless struggle against every aspiration of society for freedom and independence, very soon recognized that the trial by jury was dangerous. The reactionary press pronounced the trial on the streets, and began to revolt against it, which incidentally is still going on. The government has adopted a reactionary program after defeating...
hold on. Okay, it's 1870s, not 1970s. Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. After defeating the revolutionary movement of the 1870s, it shamelessly declared to the representatives of society that it can consider them to be a street people, unqualified to interfere not only with legislation, but also with the management of the state, who should be banished from the sanctuary where Russian citizens are put on trial and punished by the methods of the Panovs. In 1887, a law was issued by which the cases of crimes committed by and against officials were removed from the jury trial and transferred to the court of crown judges with class representatives.
Oh, by the way, just crown judges with class representatives means most likely hereditary aristocracy, like people related to the Tsar.
So pretty much if you commit a crime against a member of the ruling class, you don't get a jury? Is that what they're saying there?
No. If a ruling class member commits a crime, like if the police officer or a...
Oh, okay. I had it other way around.
Yeah, so it's saying that cases which was committed by and against, so were removed and transferred to hereditary. So instead of having a jury, you're actually having a totally a fail son judge doing it.
I see. As is well known, these class representatives merge into a single panel with the judge officials, or voiceless extras playing the pathetic role of understanding, hand-holding what the officials of the judicial department will like to decide. This is one of those laws that, in a long line, stretched through the entire recent reactionary era of Russian history, united by one common desire, to restore firm power. Circumstances, I lost my spot. Circumstances forced the authorities to come in contact with the street in the second half of the 19th century, and the composition of the street changed with the astonishing rapidity. And dark Philistines were replaced by citizens who began to realize their rights and were even able to put up fighters for rights. And sensing this, the authorities recoiled with horror and now made frantic efforts to enclose themselves with the Chinese wall, to wall themselves up in a fortress inaccessible to any manifestations of social activism. But I have deviated somewhat from my theme.
Okay, so basically Lenin was saying that in the 1870s, they tried to do some kind of mild democratic reforms. But then when actually the people started to like get aware of that, they then replaced any democratic reform with like basically like they put up a Chinese wall and be like, okay, no, we're gonna like have class judges as in like aristocracy and nobility as the only people who can be judges and no more democratic participation. That this is why I tell people that they have to read Lenin in theory, because bourgeois, I actually got into like my many arguments. But what people don't realize is that bourgeoisie theory is basically like justifying the hierarchy. While when you read Lenin, he's still relevant because he's actually he actually talks about like it's working class theory is very different, is because he's trying to it's basically trying to clear up the nonsense, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I hear you. I always can get better at this kind of stuff, so it's good to go through some Lenin stuff.
I know Lenin
a little bit, but I'm not gonna be one of those people who pretend that I'm like some sort of expert on Lenin. So
no, you can't. It's funny. I can always tell when people fake read Chomsky, for example. Chomsky, for example, I can always tell when they fake read Lenin, because what they do is they don't understand how big of a troll Lenin is and how much he jokes. So then, like Chomsky, like claims that he read State and Revolution, and I know he did not, because when you read State and Revolution, the only thing you'll know is that like there's a guy named Karl Kautsky that Lenin does not like, and that you'll just realize that Karl Kautsky sucks. So you can always tell when people fake read Lenin is that they don't get him, and then they always read like State and Revolution or some BS like that, and then they miss the whole point. So you can never.
I'm always clear. I'm always clear that I can always learn more. That's why I'm happy to be on here. Cause I'm learning a little bit more. I don't like there's a lot of people that you can tell they bullshit. Like
I know they can. Like I can always tell. But the thing about it is that a lot of Americans don't realize like capitalism. Like sometimes when you're reading Lenin, I literally have to change one word to make it relevant. Like I've changed the 9 out of 10 times I have to change Constitutional Democratic Party to the Democratic Party, and word for word it's identical. And that's because our society is built around the capitalism. Like it's a factory, a machine. And if you reorganize society, a lot of these organizations will be very similar to each other and serve very similar purposes. And Americans like don't think about like, what is their function? Like I always say, like, imagine a play, and who plays the role of Nancy Pelosi in Tsarist Russia? Oh, that's Peter Struve, by the way. So a lot of Americans, like, it's a way of thinking where you can kind of see it, and what he does is so good. So, and then another one that really irritates me is you can't, like only intellectuals can read this. And I'm like, nope. People in Tsarist Russia had 82% literacy. 82% of the people in Tsarist Russia could not read. So, I would love to have you back for next week. But
we can do that.
Can you tell us like how to find you? Where do we find when do you guys do your show on the Fred Hampton left?
Most of you guys know me as Socialist MMA, but check out Fred Hampton Leftist. Twitter, exactly how it sounds, Fred Hampton Leftist. But we stream on multiple platforms. The best way to check us out is probably subscribing to YouTube or on Twitch. But we also are on internet radio as well. Just check us out on YouTube, subscribe, because we upload every day. Yesterday we had 2 lives. Actually, we had 3.
What did you guys talk about?
It wasn't me. That's why it's good to subscribe to our channel and check out our content, because it's a network of Black leftists. So I wasn't on yesterday, but CJ talked to Fiorella Isabel. My friend RJ talked to Danny Harbon, and I forgot another live. So, but
I don't know who they are. Wait, so you had two. Okay, so Fiorella Isabel.
Yeah.
Oh, Fiorella. Yeah, I know Fiorella.
I probably just butchered her name.
I know Fiorella. Yeah, I know her. That's so cool. And who's the other person?
And then RJ interviewed Danny Hanson.
Oh, he's the I know him very well.
Yeah. So my point is that we, even if I'm not there that day, we always have people uploading content. And then our main show with all of us on the panel, this is our official podcast, is usually every Thursday. But you can check me out. I have Tuesday shows, but we upload every day. Check us out.
And what do you guys cover? Like, is it current events, history, culture?
Yeah, good question. We cover issues from the lens of fighting against the U.S. empire. We talk about Black empowerment, the police state, history. We talk about Black history a lot, and we focus. We don't cover the political drama. We focus more on policy, where we talk about police abolition, foreign policy, and any policy that will not only affect the Black community, but disenfranchised communities as a whole. It's the same kind of concept that Fred Hampton had when he wanted to build a Rainbow Coalition. So that's kind of the issues that we cover. Make sure people understand that we are going against a ruling class that what's the best way to put it? No matter what your position is, they're always looking for more power. That's kind of what we want people to understand. Break out the two-party duopoly, focus more on mutual aid. But this kind of stuff we cover. And by covering foreign policy and the crimes of our state that lead people down that path, we're realizing that we must stand up and do something as a collective unit of Black people. So that kind of in a nutshell what we cover. Foreign policy, I love talking about that. Police state, healthcare, like these things that actually affect the Black community and other people of color. That way you can check out at Fred Hampton Leftist. That's
okay. Well, check them out. We're going to put the link in the description box. We also and also check out Nick's Substack. We're going to put the link on the description box. And the cool thing is we're going to have him back next week to read the rest of the piece because it's a long piece.
Yay. I'm super excited about that. Thank you guys.
Oh yeah. And then at the end, I'll can I just ask you not to read ahead just because I like to get the.
I got you.
Thank you.
I won't cheat.
Okay. In that case, with that, I guess we'll bid you adieu. Well, no, what we say "paka paka" in Russian. I'm yeah.
Привет. I hope you guys had a good, I hope you guys enjoyed Beat But Not to Death. The fact pattern is so similar to the George Floyd case, because with Timofey Vazdukov, 4 officers beat him to death, and then they let most of them off with the slap on the wrist, especially the highest one. And then they even transferred him to a different branch. And so instead of beating up city people, they'll beat up country peasants. And so it just reminds me of every case in America. And yeah, nothing's changed. It was funny because once I read this from this 1920 Ohio socialist, or maybe it was the Oregon socialist. It said something like, the Tsar is dead, but his ghost lives in America. And that's exactly what it is. The Tsar, we actually haven't evolved past the Tsarist system, no matter how much they try to convince you have freedom and democracy. Anyways, we're going to have Nick back again to read the rest of this piece because it actually applies everything, all of Lenin's analysis about how many cases there are, how typical it is, everything applies to America as well as Tsarist Russia. And And so that's kind of what is very exciting and frightening, because what's exciting is that there are so many similarities, we can actually get change because there's a Lenin method. But it also means, oh my God, the system's so ossified that really it is going to be incredibly hard to do anything, even just the smallest change. I mean, Fight for 15 should not take 8 years if allegedly all the unions are backing it. So what's going on? Why is it taking 8 years? Or 9 years now, because it started in 2012, I think. And now you can't have a Fight for 15. And we already covered Lenin wage. Check out our episode with Paul Knox to see what our Lenin wage is supposed to be. But it goes to show us the folly of everything in America. So today I'm going to address 2 questions from Twitter. And then if you guys have any other questions, we'll address that. And I'm also thinking about potentially having maybe a movie night or something every few weeks, if you guys want to do a watch party. So if you do want to have a movie night or a watch party, just let us know in the comment section on what night would work for you. Because I remember a few weeks ago, Janet and I watched Sobibor together, and it was a really good movie. And so I realized there's a lot of historical movies that we can watch together that might be fun. So we'll see. So with the first question, is it okay? I'll continue to talk and rant. Okay, so what it is that we need to try to get people to be, by the way, dialectical in their thinking and not get hung up on idealism. Okay, so okay, perfect. Now we have our first question. So it all started with, I believe it looks great. No, it looks great. It's fine. We'll figure it out if they can't. Okay, I'll read out the question just in case people can't see it. So it all started with somebody either looking down upon theory or calling Lenin white. I forgot which one. So somebody asked, I would agree with you. I wasn't necessarily saying that communism is bad because white people made it, just that left-wing politics consumable for white people should never be looked down upon. It helps no one. So I guess this has to do with, there's a guy on Twitter who's I don't want to mention his name, but he often does really bad takes. He's kind of he's always, he has good leftist vocabulary, but it's always kind of racially tinged and just bad. But he's always talking about how talking about racism is going to alienate white people, blah, blah, blah. And most of the time, when people claim that something's going to alienate white people, they actually do not have any scientific basis on what the white working class actually thinks. They're just basing it on their assumption. And often their assumptions are super wrong, because what we know is that it's not the poor white people who are racist. Because if you're poor, you're going to have a minimum wage job. If you have a minimum wage job, you'll be hanging out with other poor people who happen to be overwhelmingly people of color. You'll be hanging. So, I mean, it's definitely not the poor whites that are the racist people. It's usually the petty bourgeoisie. And so they often think that the working class believes what they believe, but the working class is often 110 times smarter than them. Because the system fails for them so often that they're immune to propaganda. I remember going to South Carolina, and I was in this rural area where it was kind of like an older white man, and he was pretty poor, but it was funny when we were talking. There was, I remember there was like a video about U.S. bringing democracy, and he just started rolling down in laughter about the democracy part. And then you see the New York Times editorials and Chuck Todd doing all this. So the issue is, in order to get, okay, so there are two issues with this. You don't have to make something. Whiteness means it is a pan-European identity. It was started by, I kid you not, read Gerald Horne's Counter-Revolution of 1776, or even White Supremacy Confronted. But it was, whiteness did not exist it doesn't even exist in most of Europe, because whiteness is a pan-European identity. It is actually a form of cultural genocide, because you know what they used to do? They, like, let's say you were Serbian and you came and your name was Djokovic. That's the only Serbian I can think of right now. Novak Djokovic. They would have changed to, if he came, they would have like just changed his name to Duke, and then they would have forced assimilated him. Like his kids would have had to go to school and they would have been discouraged speaking in Serbian. And it was like it's a forced assimilation project to turn somebody from a Serbian to a white person, or from Austrian to a white person. So that is something like, so a lot of people that in America who are white have had their cultural heritage erased, and there is no white identity that isn't useful for the slave owner to have a lot of professional middle class. I mean, professional managerial class, the slave drivers. And so I think that we should work on getting people to reject the idea of whiteness. And I mean, that doesn't mean that their cultural heritage is usually very rich. It's sometimes like when you ask a lot of people who identify as white, they'll say, I'm 1/4 Irish and I'm half Russian, and my math may not add up, but they have a very rich cultural heritage that's been erased. So the idea is to either reclaim the old cultural heritage, which is very rich, or create a new cultural heritage based on the fact that they belong to a class of oppressed people who are oppressed by the way they make money. And so I don't so there is no reason. And one more proof that whiteness doesn't exist in Europe, they fought Europeans fought 2 world wars against each other. So they don't see them, like a Hungarian will never see themselves as a Slav, and a German, they fought a few world wars. So it's not, it's not the same way. And then another thing it does is it creates social chauvinism. For example, I remember I have a friend from Serbia, and then this lady was like calling her white, and she was like, wait a minute, if I'm so white, why did the fascists kill like millions of us? Like, why did they commit genocide? And then you have to be like, yeah, it's kind of right. So it creates a social chauvinism where you're not actually, okay, so what happens in America is that because oppression is mainly based on what American society defines as race, the same kind of oppressions exist in other countries, but it'll look different. For example, in India, it'll be based on caste. So skin color or colorism may not be related to how oppressed they are. Because India is kind of weird. You'll have caste people of every caste who have every skin color. And then but the lower caste will still be oppressed. I mean, colorism exists, but let's just pretend for simplicity's sake that we'll talk about that later. So that means that, for example, in some olden villages in India, if you said you were Brahmin, they might give you water in a cup to drink. But if you were not Brahmin, they might actually make you dig water from the well. But then Americans can't see this kind of oppression if it's not like exclusively based on the US definition of race. And that's why they get fooled and they don't understand that the Dalai Lama is the slave owner. I mean, I've actually written an article about this, and in his own book, the Dalai Lama says our system was feudal. He's not even disagreeing with this. And then you'll sometimes see that that's why it's like so easy to do regime change operations, because Americans can't kind of understand that, the Dalai Lama enslaved Tibetans. And so also the transatlantic slave trade has a lot to do with the Ottoman Empire, in that the Ottoman Empire basically controlled the entire Mediterranean. So the West Europeans had to kind of go around because they couldn't fight the Ottoman Empire Navy. They tried a few crusades and they just couldn't. So they had to go all the way around. And that's why they picked that area in West Africa, as opposed to, say, East Africa, which, again, the Ottoman Empire kind of stopped that from happening. But that doesn't mean that the Ottoman Empire didn't have slaves. Of course they did. The Austro-Hungarian Empire also had slaves, but for the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, they had Slavic slaves, mostly. Prussia also, and then even the Tsar of Russia, he brought over like Germanic people to be middle managers. So there were a lot of estates in feudal estates in Tsarist Russia that were owned by Germanic people. And then even Prussia. And then after World War I, these like, I think there were millions of these like hereditary kind of marginal nobility who owned like a little mini fiefdom. And that's why Hitler was able to recruit so many people into the Wehrmacht to like reclaim their slave lands. Both in Prussia, Prussia like hit some parts of like Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. And then the Austria-Hungarian Empire hit parts of Ukraine, Poland. So they had the same exact structure. Some of them were like, they were traded, they were sold, but it didn't look exactly like this. So instead of structure, when you're trying to look at the world, a lot of people will assume, oh, okay, there was no slavery in Eastern Europe because there were no people of different races, but that's not what they did. When the need arises for basically wealthy people always need free and or cheap labor. Oh, in the Hungarian Empire, what happened is that the Magyar, I believe the Austria-Hungarian were the royalty, and the Magyar people, the ones that we call Hungarians now, they were like the middle managers. And then they had a lot of Slavic people as slaves. And then so even if you ask a Hungarian person now, they'll be like, oh yeah, this treaty in Treaty of Trenton, I think, in World War I, like cut off like 1/6 of like all these like Hungarian lands. But then it's kind of like, are you going to ask Serbians and Czech people who are kind of like serfs to live in that same land managed by these weirdos? I don't know. And so it's a little bit more complicated than that. And if you're like too focused on the way Americans see race, you're just gonna not figure out what's going on. And half the time, like both in China and Tsarist Russia, they even call them the White Guards, and they're often dressed just like the KKK, but you don't realize that that's why you can have them be victims of communism and not the KKK, because you're not looking at the function. So that's why I suggest that people don't become racial essentialist, but have a historical materialistic outlook on race. And once again, I cannot recommend this book enough. The Counter-Revolution of 1776 has the best historical material analysis of race in America. So what's the second question? Are we ready? Okay, so yesterday I got into a little bit of an argument with this person who claimed that I was I mean, it all started with my friend Beth. She's Fairy Wing. Follow her; she's awesome. Fairy Wings. She was talking about basically the AFL-CIO and how they kind of it did bad to the working class. And the joke in third world countries is that they call them the AFL-CIA for very, very, very good reason. Anyways, so Zach said, sliced seven bread. My brother joined a recent union recently and told me they have to swear not to be members of a communist party to join. Anti-communism runs deep. Yes, this is true. And the worst part about it is that the thing about communist parties is that they all run on democratic centralism. That is where you decide to get the will of the party members or the organization members, whatever, like the party. This is the annoying thing about having mistranslations from Old Russian or Chinese is that people kind of get the wrong impression. Like agency is probably the best translation instead of party, but I guess we're stuck with party because that's what happens when you translate Old Russian and Chinese texts and by weird people who are not the best translators. So what happens is that, like, in order for workers to get liberation, like every time we've had a dictatorship of the proletariat, it's always used the Marxist-Leninist method. Never, like, there has never been, because the special thing about democratic centralism and Marxism-Leninism, or mostly what Lenin did, is that he figured out a way to have a political organization that could resist the capital hegemony, like just that organization itself. So, for example, you'll see this. The Green Party, in a lot of countries, they've gotten elected. I believe in Latvia, they even had a president. In Germany, they have quite a bit of seats. In Austria, they have quite a few seats. So in all those countries, the Green Party is not, once they get elected, they're just like the Democratic Party in America. They're like a neoliberal party that once in a while has environmental slogans. And sometimes they even align with like total fascists. So the Green Party itself, because they don't use democratic centralism, once they get elected, they turn a lot like the Democratic Party. Just check them out in any other country in the world where they have seats and it's just like, oh. And that's because the parliamentary pressures are there, the fundraising, the appeasing capitalists, the media, blah, blah, blah. And because of that, they can't actually resist capitalism. And all of them, unless they follow a Marxist-Leninist method, all of them just kind of get swept over. And so basically what the unions are saying is that we only allow you to advocate for the workers this much and no more. So if they are purging communists, they're basically saying, okay, workers, you can only get like some concessions, but the minute you start being very pro-worker, we're going to have to kick you out. And that to me is an anti-worker union. And but what happens is that there's a lot of confusion because the right wing attacks unions because they don't want any collective bargaining, any workers' rights. But then there is also the left wing. But then there's also the limits in which the unions, as they are organized, can exist within the capitalistic system. For example, we had about 50 years, maybe. I believe the unions were legalized in around 1930, but don't quote me on this. Somebody Google this if you can. I will remember this for next time. But before the unions were legalized in America, the unions had very effective methods for collective bargaining. My favorite is still that the Colorado mine case where this union leader infiltrated one of the management spots, and then he went and asked all the workers, "Are you going to join the union?" And the workers who seemed scabby, he kind of got them fired. And then they had only union members inside that mine, and then they unionized. And so what happens is now, because the unions have been legal for 70 years, they'll only do the NLRB, blah, 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 kind of like what that. And that's why Amazon, for example, always fails on unionism. Like that's why they can't even get workers to unionize with Amazon, because Amazon can go and threaten, like they actually threatened this worker with cancer with her healthcare benefit. And so they're only doing the legal fight. And the thing about it is that it's not like in a capitalistic system, if you are only doing the legal fight, there's only a limit on what you can do, because it's like the czar's not going to have a law that lets you overthrow him, right? And it's the same way with the unions. And so if they don't use democratic confederalism, so the unions are better. Having even like the worst union on earth is better than nothing, but it's not enough. So what you have to realize is that there's a limit, and that's why you can't, Amazon, Nissan, these factories can't unionize, because the union leaders are only doing the legal fight. They're not even having they're not checking history. If you look at American history between 1890 and 1930, you'll see that they were very creative in the ways they got their collective bargaining. They analyzed the supply chain. Just go to Marxist.org and just look at anyone from any writing from the 1920s. Like, these people were not educated, but then they had data. They did data analysis. They were just like, this is where the supply chain went from here to here. And this is where we need to have this chart. Like, it's like such a high level writing compared to all the crap that you get from these Harvard PhDs, Harvard people. And so, so I would actually recommend, I don't think anyone's listening to me who can unionize, but if you are, instead of also have a Marxist study circle, bake some cookies or something like that, and have a Marxist study circle where you read these things and kind of understand what the situation is, where you discuss it with these people. Have your own reading group if you can, if anyone's listening, but no one, there's a 9 out of 10 chance that no one is listening, but I bet you most, I don't know. Are you guys I'm just curious, just if you are. No, I'm just saying, are there 36 petty bourgeoisie, or are there 36 people who are working class? Okay, we'll see. I don't know if anyone's listening. Okay, 1935. I was right with the 1930 something. So it was about a good 50 years. Anyways, and if you're a petty bourgeoisie, why don't you just why don't you have a Marxist study circle at your house or something like that, or on Zoom? Maybe I could I don't know, I'll have to figure out how to make these materials available for you guys to have your own study circles or whatever, but we'll think about it. I do want to make this more interactive one day. I don't know what else to do, but if you have ideas, put it down. Okay. We'll work on that. We'll get the translation. Okay. Does anyone have any other questions? Or, by the way, this week, so apparently in order to get monetized in Twitch, I need to stream 12 times in 1 month. So this week I will have some random streams, just not when Katie Halper is doing her show. So maybe I'll have a Monday debunking Prager U stream or whatever. So just kind of, keep an eye on it and hit the bell and subscribe so that you can get it, because we need to have 12 streams in a month, and I'm going to try to make it in the next 2 weeks. And this week on Historically, we had our episode is Islam with Chinese characteristics, where we have Timur from he's still Muslim, and he goes about 800 years worth of history of the Chinese Muslims. It's really cool. So check that out. Does anyone have any questions, or will we see each other later this week? Oh, by the way, we're on Rokfin. We're going to do some mini documentaries as paid content. And as free content, we'll put up a lot of the stuff. So keep an eye out on that too. And if there isn't any, please share this with your friends and family. Tell them that they have to watch it, or else, like, our climate, we're all headed towards apocalypse, and this is our only hope. Okay, that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but tell them that. Yeah, that's what you need to tell them, that watching Sundays with Lenin is their only hope of. Okay, I can't even not laugh while saying this, but whatever. Anyways, yeah, tell them something like that. Make up something creative and get them to watch with you. And let me know. And please comment, like, subscribe, and everything else that you need to do. Oh, follow Lenin on Lenin Tweets. Yeah. Yep, please do. I really want to have a right-wing racist uncle that we convert and make him fun during Thanksgiving. So that's just been my dream. So please. Yep.